Hey everybody, welcome to the Anthony and Todd Show. We are a weekly podcast that critiques and memes music. I'm your host Trevor, aka how do you Anel Olsen, aka there existed an addiction to butt. And I'm joined by my ever attentive co-host, my best friend, my pal, my amigo, my droog, Vincent.
AKA Homer Simpson is my favorite country artist. AKA complicate your life with blood.
It's baloney. This is episode 111 of the Anthony and Todd Show, an episode we would like to call L'Orange is just a LaCroix flavor, but I know that Vincent wrote this as L'Orange. It's just a LaCroix flavor, and it makes more sense that way. We got 5 records to be talking to you about this week. First, I want to go over the latest Clipping album, There Existed an Addiction to Blood, the latest Angel Olsen project, All Mirrors, latest Sturgill Simpson project, Sound and Fury, just the album, not the anime. We're talking about the latest Wilco project, Ode to Joy. I think that one's been done before. And the latest L'Orange collaboration with Jeremiah Jae, Complicate Your Life with Violence.
Yeah, just the album, not the anime. Okay, before we start, if you want to follow the Anthony and Todd Show on social media, you can find us at Anthony and Todd on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Find us at YouTube at youtube.com/the Anthony and Todd Show. And if you want to support us monetarily, you can find us on Patreon, patreon.com/the Anthony and Todd Show, so I can save enough money to buy a huge jet ski. Just like one giant one. So I can put it like
it's like a banana boat. It's like super long. That everybody gets on it.
Yeah. It's a communal
only one person can steer, but everybody else has steering bars so they can act like they're helping.
Did you know there was an addiction to blood?
I did.
Just drinking blood.
Wow.
That's it.
This reminds me of my old vampire class.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that will help in this.
Yeah, I think
you can bring in some nuance.
I think so. We'll talk about the relationship between blood sucking and rape. That was an actual huge theme in the class. We're going to be going over the latest Clipping record, There Existed an Addiction to Blood. Clipping is an LA experimental hip-hop and industrial hip-hop trio consisting of the MC David Diggs, the most well-known of the trio, as well as some producers, William Hudson and Jonathan Snipes. Wesley Snipes. David Diggs is also known for acting. He was obviously in Hamilton and played a huge role in that. I think he played George Washington?
No.
Thomas Jefferson.
Yes.
That was it.
He played 2 characters. I forget what the other one was. I know Thomas Jefferson is for sure.
Yeah, that's the one. I wonder who played George Washington then. Oh, well. Yeah, he obviously won a Tony and a Grammy for Hamilton was huge, and his work in that was outstanding. He also was in Blackish.
He has a minor role in that.
Yeah.
And then he also executive produced The Mayor.
I vaguely remember that, but not to a huge degree.
I think it was like a young SoundCloud rapper becomes the mayor as like a meme.
Oh yeah.
It was like it started as a meme,
like
raid Area 51, and then became real.
I thought it was a funny concept, but I'm not sure if it ever went anywhere. Anyway, this trio that he has with these producers released Clipping, their first album, back in 2014. Singles like Work Work and Summertime and Story 2, as well as their last record, Splendor and Misery, came out in 2016, which we reviewed early on in the show with singles like, I'm not even singles, I don't think. They were just notable songs. Baby Don't Sleep, Air 'Em Out, All Black, A Better Place.
Very theatrical mix telling a story of a slave isolated in space and just this dystopian
it's a
world.
really like weird concept, but it also it worked really well. I really liked this record.
Think the biggest problem that the album had is it felt like there's too short of tracks, which I think it could be looked at as a good thing because it's you leaving them wanting more. But I felt like there's just too many moments that could be classified as like interludes, and like
I think we'll come back to that in this review. And this new album, There Existed an Addiction to Blood, is essentially twisting horrorcore in a new direction. This is not your grandfather's ICP. This is for the new kids.
Essentially, horrorcore has always been a genre about like teaching morals by it's showcasing the worst of humanity.
It's almost like an Aesop's Fables kind of thing.
Yeah.
Except for like More gruesome.
Yeah, so like notable horrorcore acts, ICP, Eminem, Tyler the Creator, recently Luke Human. I think you can make a defense of how much of what they're actually saying is just bravado and how much is actually critique of society. Where I think one thing that this comes through is actually it's critique. It actually has something like themes to back up the violence, which is interesting.
It really depends. I also found it interesting that all the horrorcore artists that you named, with the I think exception of ICP, none of them are really horrorcore anymore.
Yeah.
We're looking at the music that Tyler and Lou and Eminem are now making, and it definitely like fell away from that genre. Maybe it's just something you grow out of. I'm not sure, but ICP is obviously still making music, and I don't think I've ever learned any morals from that.
Well, it's just like it's preemptive. It's like it's not the best example of like morals, but like that's the point of it.
I think ICP is probably the best example of horror.
Yeah.
Though. But this
because clowns are scary.
This is definitely a new direction that we're gonna go in. Let's just hop into
starting
it,
this off. We get a traditional clipping intro, just static and Dewey Diggs just rambling on it.
Just like every other
his
one.
technical ability on this is like the best it's ever been. I would say, like when he gets going, like he just doesn't stop. Like I don't think there's a verse that isn't. It feels
No,
at least like 8 minutes on this.
I will give him that. He's extremely talented in every bar that he delivers on here. But as we talked about with Splinter and Misery, sometimes these tracks go on for a really long time and just feel way too bloated.
No, the thing with Splendor and Misery is there was just like there wasn't enough moments that felt like encapsulated the full scope of things.
Right.
Whereas
They were
like
very short, and they were like, this is the complete opposite
Yeah.
end of the spectrum, where they thought Splendor and Misery, I think, barely grazed above like a half an hour.
Yeah.
It really wasn't a long project, but this one clocks in at about an hour and 8 minutes.
And
over
at least
15 tracks.
At least 20 minutes of that is the end, which we'll get into in a second.
Mm-hmm.
But going over this whole entire thing, I think the biggest problem this thing has is just like its interludes and its like end trail segments. And this is an experimental hip hop album through and through. So I guess in theory, these ideas are experimental. So having just a minute of like television static at the end of La Mala Ordinara or Ordina or
La Mala Ordina, and it's not even a minute, it's probably 3 minutes. We finished all of the verses. Every guest on here finishes at like the 3 minute mark.
Yeah.
And then we have static for the rest of the time.
it isn't interesting. It isn't like there's an effects any effects put on it. It isn't like moving. There's no what is it? It doesn't flow. It doesn't
have any
progress.
momentum. It doesn't
Yeah.
do anything.
It just stays the same for a long period
It's
of time.
static.
And it doesn't fit. It's not creepy either, because like some of these things are supposed to be like eerie and like they're supposed to like set up an atmosphere. That's just television static.
Yeah.
That's about it. It doesn't really
The
do
scariest television I ever saw was in Poltergeist.
anything. Probably the most notable thing we need to mention to just showcase how like the piano burning segment at the end, the last
The
track.
elephant in the room, essentially.
It's a piece by Adina Ania
Yeah.
Lockwood, and it's a experimental piece I've heard of before. I've never heard it. Like I knew of it. I just didn't know the name attached to it. But it's essentially just a piano set on fire, and it doesn't fit with anything. It's not really experimental because it's really been done before. They don't progress the idea. There's anything new about it. I guess there's some historical aspect, which is nice, but like
I'm gonna
even
draw
then-
like just drawing in my classical music knowledge. This is a very like John Cage-ish thing to do, and I think that in essence is a little cheesy.
yeah.
I don't necessarily like that. You might as well stuck 433 at the end of this, the piece where it's all silence by John Cage. He was known for doing experimental music and still does, but like a lot of it is based on just random aspects. He's got one where he has 4 microphones up in like a rafter, and they're all like a big line, and then he's got these other microphones down at the bottom, and at different times you let them go, and they swing like pendulums, and when they cross the other microphones, there's like static and feedback, and it essentially ends when all of the pendulums stop, and they're all hanging right above the other microphones, and it's just feedback, and that was considered like a big experimental piece. Like piano burning is a classic example of this, but like for Clipping to use it as being an experimental band, like that's not experimental because it's been done before.
Yeah.
It's not an experiment. It's just performing an art piece that has been done before and is essentially notated. Like Lockwood notated how to do this, and it was done before, and it could be replicated again as a piece of music or a piece of art. And to have Clipping do it at the end, and you don't get to see the piano burning just in audio format, like you don't get the full effect. I think that by using that, it was a little bit of a cop-out, honestly.
Yeah, it just doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't fit the personality of the group.
It doesn't add any elements to the horrorcore, the new direction they're going into. It doesn't add any elements to any of the themes, or really any reason to exist.
Right.
And it's not aggravating to the point where I think it's supposed to be like trollish either. Like even going back to like the static moment on La Mala, weirdly enough, I can't believe I'm going to say this, Eric Andre's Blarf had a segment, I think it's called like Satan is Real, where it's 15 minutes of static. And it's like, it's fantastic because it also like, it changes a little bit. There's a little bit of progression to it, but it's also just a giant fucking troll.
Yeah.
This is not a giant fucking troll. This is just, it's not meme.
No.
Like this is a meme move. There's no point to it.
No, I don't. I guess I'm just not understanding like why piano burning had to be on here.
Yeah.
And I guess I am a little frustrated at it. I think
It's
because I'm frustrated at it because they aren't knowing their audience.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like Eric Andre, when he does that, obviously knows like he's gonna get a reaction out of people and say like he's trying to push the boundary. Like, oh, is this art? Is this a song? But also like this is the same guy that has his show and does like the dumb things that he does on his show. But to have piano burning on here, it's not like Clipping was saying like, oh, we're gonna troll everybody. Like I have a feeling that they had some sort of like deeper meaning in mind for this piece, but it
doesn't resonate.
It doesn't
with
land
anything.
at all.
Yeah. What was good about this album? Well, I can tell you there's actually a lot.
There is a lot. Yeah.
Good about this album. I think the biggest problem is just it wastes too much space throughout, and I think this thing is just way long, and I think it needed trimming.
Mm-hmm.
One more thing before we get into like the good things, the Possession interlude, it's 2 minutes long. It's just a film excerpt.
I also think the Prophecy interlude is a little boring as well because that's more static.
Yeah, but that was not round long enough to.
It's not super long, but also like
it changes,
just to have it, I think is annoying.
It changes a little bit. It's more like rainfall than static. It reminds me of like. Just like being in a cityscape of some type.
It reminded me just of static.
Yeah.
So.
But like it doesn't. The Possession doesn't really build up its space, or it's worth it just playing an old film clip, and it doesn't really have anything. It's about hypnosis,
right?
Like this goofy.
And like we've heard excerpts like this before, but also like in a well produced way.
Yeah.
With some sort of backbeat. Like this is literally just
the film.
That film.
Even if it was like an original created skit, it doesn't do anything.
No.
Yeah.
All right, let's get into the good stuff.
Good stuff. Starting off, Nothing is Safe. Talking about first of all, like a John Carpenter-esque beat, so like Halloween-esque beat, which is really interesting. This very frail, frightening keys. It's talking about this essentially bloodbath of a bunch of police entering a trap house, essentially just getting into a huge firefight. And how in this point of society nothing is safe, there's no escape, and it's this very threatening and ominous space, and it's spooky, it's terrifying, but it has purpose. It's really interesting, and it's not just like a bloodbath.
Yeah.
With it's not just a bloodbath that had in the grander sense of society, it doesn't have any meaning. But like in the track for David to write this bloodbath, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Like, there's a critique of society going on. Society.
We live in a society.
Big buzzword. He Dead featuring Ed Balloon. Ed Balloon just put out a record, apparently a lot of people like recently on I can't think of the label, but he's been getting a lot of name recognition as of late. And he has a good personality across this. It reminds me a lot of Obenyar, is that his name? Off the latest Danny Brown album, his
Oh, yeah.
features there.
Yeah.
It's very like soulful, also very like frail and scratchy, just lost in space. He's in a void. Really interesting. A little bit of Lonnie Holly there, just that use of space.
Yeah, I really liked his vocals on here. I thought that they were, they added a lot of much needed like melodic sense to the track.
Yeah, it's just very empty, and it's just very gelatinous in its shape.
I liked it.
Really
yeah.
weird, and it's nice use of space. Daveed Diggs comes on the second half, talking essentially interpolating Kendrick Lamar's Rigor Mortis verse. He's talking about werewolves and how they're essentially
How
just
scary they are.
yeah, just boo werewolves. No, he's essentially comparing werewolves to as cops, talking about silver bullets and shootouts,
Yeah.
and essentially creating this environment where, similar to Nothing Is Safe, it's very frightening, inescapable, punishable, just lots of paranoia going on in the track. I think it's really interesting. Lama Ordina, besides the last minute, I think this track's really interesting. I think David comes with some of his most punchy flows yet. Talking about skull crack is what a skull does. I think if you want to have something menacing, something kind of crime ridden, this like almost like this almost like 70s cocaine
Yeah.
filled adventure, like something like a Scarface, you get someone on Griselda Records, and he got Benny the Butcher, and that's very fitting, and that's like the vibe I got off of Benny the Butcher's last album. And I think the biggest, besides the static at the end, the biggest disappointment I had is El Camino sounds really like West Side Gun.
Yeah, exactly.
And
He fit. I can obviously see like why the Griselda guys keep working with El Camino, because he just sounds like one of their relatives.
but it
His verse was funny though.
Yeah,
and
he's
it made me
talented.
wish. It made me wish West Side was on here instead of him.
He reminds you know that stupid meme where it's like never talk to me and my son again. It's like a photo of someone and it's just like a distorted,
Yeah.
like, shortened version. That's like West Side Gun and his son is El Camino. Just a shortened version of him. Because he's a little bit higher pitched than West Side, just a teeny
Just
bit.
a little bit.
Yeah.
Because he's smaller.
Run for Your Life is one of the most interesting moments of hip hop I've heard all year, setting up this. Essentially, Daveed Diggs is essentially just in the street as noises kind of come around him. You get this car that's blasting the synth music that is used on the hook. La Chat is providing like almost like a Gangsta Boo like performance to
Yeah.
back him up. She has a very interesting like flashiness to her voice. I think it really works. I like the environment, the use of space being creative, how elements are kind of circling around him, how he's really just talking over a lot of silence for the most part, and the use of space is evolving and ever changing, and it doesn't stay around for too long. When we get to La Chat, it's a full-on like production space.
Yeah.
It's not just the emptiness anymore. So we evolve through the space enough, and when the gimmick's essentially over, it's dead. Like we go to a new space, and it's interesting. I think it's like a nice tight composition, which works really well. Blood of the Fang is a fantastic moment, talking about essentially just talking about race in a way that's very vampiristic.
Yeah.
Bringing up Black Panther movement and kind of the desperate need for something like that, bringing up the members of Black Panther Party, talking about essentially the vampiristic way blacks are being killed by the police. And I think it's really interesting. His performance reminds me, at least with his ad-libs, reminds me a little bit of This Is America, Don Glover. Also, he looks like his like facial, his beard hair combo looks like give it a little bit. Also, he's really handsome. I never realized that before, how handsome Daveed Diggs is. Like he's always been like handsome, but he's never been like, ooh, I want that. He's really attractive in that music video. Also, the music video is really weird. They're doing surgery on a gun, and the gun's like bleeding out of all these different orifices. There's a bunch of bright strobe lights. Daveed Diggs is like trapped in this like blood pile. You know, he's eating like a chocolate AK-47. Just a bunch of strange shit that would just like moves very unorthodoxly is interesting. Stories to Seven's talking about kind of this this like femme fatale that's essentially just a werewolf.
Yeah.
And her progression as she tries to what's the word, being like a seductress? What's the term where it's like a succubus, essentially trying to con this man into a night. In the end, she's killed by a silver bullet. She's killed by an ongoing taxi.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. I'm trying to really understand what like the point of it is. I guess
just to continue the story saga, I think.
Yeah, but like I don't. That one's like the most like spooky Halloween thingy on here. It doesn't really have. I can't figure out the point unless it's like maybe she was just living her life and she wasn't like a killer, but she kills someone in like the opening moments of the track. So like I don't understand that comparison. I don't really understand the theme to it. I think the performance is nice. I think it's a nice story. I think this album is very well timed to come around Halloween because it is spooky. There's themes of vampires, ghost. We also haven't mentioned The Haunting, which
it's one of my favorite moments.
The only interlude that I think hits it perfectly.
It's just so funny to me. It's this woman speaking on like a tape recorder, and like I actually read on Genius like the part where they fast forward. There are lyrics there. If you slow it down, you can hear what she's like actually saying. And apparently, it's like this woman who lives in an apartment and she is being haunted by some sort of ghost, but also like somebody is trying to kill her, and she thought it was her. She thought it was her brother, and then she thought it was her friend. And at the end, she eventually says, like, oh, it's Satan trying to kill me. I don't know why. And then that's, like, the end. But she's describing all these things that are, like, happening in her apartment where, like, some of them are, like, very basic. It starts out, like, really basic. Where she was like, I heard a knock, and I heard a cat, and I don't have a cat, and I heard something run across the room. But then, like, as it progresses, it's like, I felt hands around my throat. And my favorite line, I saw chimpanzees in my bedroom.
I don't think that's how hauntings work. I think you just really live close to a zoo.
I thought that was... I laughed my ass off when I heard her say that. It completely ruined the atmosphere, but it was hilarious. And I think, like, in some way, it is very, like, token for clipping. Because, like, I think that they are funny. They have, like, some funny moments on other projects. And this one, I think, is, like, pretty devoid of that. But this was the funniest part of the whole record.
Just the progression of it, how it just doesn't make any sense.
It's hilarious.
One final thing is All in Your Head featuring Counterfeit Mason and Robin Hood. Robin Hood is essentially playing a similar role to La Chat, kind of interrupting, being like a chorus to Divi Diggs. But it gets in this really empty, just void of nothingness, and then it slowly builds up to a tone place for clipping, something they've been before. Reminds me of like the build-up moments of Yeezus.
Yeah.
Like the end moments where like there would just be trash for like 3 minutes, and then they would get into like a really like mix of like distortion and soul samples, and that's what this reminds me of.
Yeah.
This mix of kind of almost theatrical, kind of gospel performance in this like empty void by Counterfeit Madison is interesting.
Yeah.
I think there's good themes in here. I just think they're not executed to their best ability. I think this is a good album. I just think it's just not. I don't feel taken care of when I'm listening to this. Like I feel like projects like this, you can get the themes, you can feel fear, you can feel paranoia, you can feel a tenseness and almost pain, but like also you feel like taken care of. You feel like the format makes sense. You feel like everything on here is essential to the project. This, I don't get that. I think it spends too much time taking experimental risk where they're already taking experimental risk in other places, and it works fine.
Yeah, I think they spend a little too much time on kind of reveling in their own joke, almost.
Yeah.
Like, what if we ruined a track by putting 3 minutes of static at the end? That's hilarious. Yeah. Like, what if we had just an interlude that's all static? What if we put piano burning at the end? Like... It almost feels like a joke or some sort of inside joke that like I'm not in on for
to me it doesn't seem like a joke. It just seems like bad ideas.
It feels like they're reveling in something that like they thought was a good idea, and then at some point they're like, I'm not really sure if this is good or not. Let's just keep it on and see what people's reaction will be. Which like I don't like I don't think anybody likes being like the butt of a joke or like the subject of like some sort of experiment where like people are trying to see how you'd react to something. Like people don't normally like that, and that's what I feel like. I feel like I've been played like a fool on some parts of this record where they're just like, here, just ship it out to him and see if he'll like it, like see what he'll think about it. Almost like an Impractical Jokers kind of thing, like a hidden camera show with some of these like static moments, and that frustrates me. I think to hear so many of these moments where I'm like, oh, can we just get on with the music? Because I really enjoy the music. I really enjoy a lot of the themes. I really enjoy David's lyricism. I think that there's a lot of really good stuff going for clipping on this record, but there are just some points like I'm just like, why can't we just cut this stuff out and get on with the good stuff? Why do we have to waste time? Why do I have to waste 18 minutes at the end listening to a piano burn to the ground? Like, I don't even get to watch it either. I don't get the full effect of it. They're just, I don't know. That's like the biggest thing for me because there's so much good stuff on here, but there's also just a lot of really annoying moments.
Yeah. Keep in mind those scores a few Talaminas right now. I'm feeling an 8, big 8.
I'd say like a solid 7+. Time to get into the latest record from Angel Olsen, All Mirrors. Angel Olsen is a singer-songwriter who recently released My Woman back in 2016, which was fantastic, with great songs like Shut Up, Kiss Me, or Give It Up, Intern, Sister, and Heart-Shaped Face. A lot of really good tracks on there.
She came in, it wasn't like her debut project, she was well known, but this one established her as like a tour de force, as essentially just passion.
That's where I first heard of her, and I was just blown away, I think.
I think what she established herself is she was very unexpectable, and that's not a word. She's
unpredictable.
Unpredictable interactions, and she's very sporadic in her passion on the track and how the essentially emotion would bleed onto the track.
Yeah.
She recently did a collaboration with can't remember Mark Ronson. That's his name.
Oh yeah.
On his last album, Late Night Feelings, and that's kind of a precursor to this in a way in the sound because she seemed a lot more faded, a lot more retro sounding, very almost beautiful, glistening,
dried out kind of.
Yeah, but in a very dried out, but also shiny. I don't know how that makes any sense. It's faded. It's not dried out.
That's the way I think of. That's the way.
Because she's not a raisin.
Well, no. She's not singing Heard It Through the Grapevine. The other California raisins.
But that's kind of a precursor to the sound that's on this. It's essentially 48 minutes, 11 tracks of an album about introspection and this very huge new location for her to be in. Sonically, it's shiny. It's kind of not jagged, but it's just sharp,
like a broken mirror.
But it's also, I think, very more predictable. It's more formulaic than her last project. Her intensity isn't as high. I think her passion across this entire thing is great. I think what the biggest problem on here is there's just some moments that are better than others. And for a lot of this, I think she's almost too retro sounding to the point where it just doesn't really... It doesn't feel like something new. It just feels like we're going back.
Yeah.
And there's no really like purpose to it. And she's not really essentially establishing herself as more than just like a throwback. Because like her performance across this entire thing is amazing. Like I think her vocals and her passion is unmatched. But I also think like it's very just samey. Like it fits the mood of the track, but it doesn't like go past that at any point. I think the themes on some of these tracks are really interesting. Like All Mirrors going into the self-reflection of herself. How at one point she did know herself, but she's kind of getting lost in this reflection and not really seeing it.
Yeah.
And I wish more tracks about this had this uncertainty and this risk that this track did. Moments like Spring where she's reflecting on her relationship because she's surrounded by her friends who are married or having kids, and she is going into her own relationship and reflecting upon that and hoping she can find someone the way her friends have found someone and have that style of life. But I think for the rest of this, it's just more reflections on relationships that really just don't seem super interesting. Well, the tracks may seem interesting. I think the passion and the strings and this huge world emasculate the sound, just something huge and otherworldly. It just doesn't really have that much substance to live off of.
Yeah. I would have to agree with that. This is not this record is not particularly the flavor of Angel Olsen that I enjoy, I guess. When Shut Up Kiss Me came out, I burned that song out. I thought that was such a great track, and I love the energy and passion and just really great. It's just a great tune, honestly. But I feel like on here we don't get as many memorable melodies. We don't get like as many memorable performances like that. Angel feels a lot, like you said, a lot more faded, a lot more low key. I think it's a good way to put that. And that's just not particularly like my favorite thing for her to do. The subjects on here I think are awesome. She talks about a lot of really poignant and interesting things. The whole all mirrors, like self-introspection kind of theme that this whole record revolves around, I think is really well done. But like you said, there are just some things that just are so much more interesting than others.
Yeah.
To where the point where I'm like, is this worth my time to sit through the entire thing?
Yeah.
I think that's like my biggest reflection on this record in and of itself. Like, I like Angel Olsen. I really like what she's doing out here. But I don't know. Some of this is just like, it's just a little boring.
Yeah.
And it goes on a little long.
It's just like we get to the last tracks feel like they run on forever while they're very glistening and just beautiful, and the strings on them are fantastic, and the scope that they create
sure, like
is otherworldly.
They can be really beautiful, but
they don't,
like you said, they just
don't feel like they go and
too long.
they just don't feel like they go anywhere.
Right.
It's just I don't feel like the journey I'm going on is really worth the trouble. What I don't really feel like I have the need to return. Like, while I like the space, it's just like I've seen it once. Like, there's no reason for me to bring it back because it just doesn't devolve into anything new. I feel like this throwback kind of pseudo 70s 80s sound, it works for her in moments like that Mark Ronson track she was on. I think she also brought a level of intensity that was very unpredictable. This feels pretty predictable. It follows normal song structure. Her performance matches a normal song structure. She doesn't really color outside the lines too much on this. There's anything like flashy or surprising. While I like Lark, I feel like Lark is probably the most unpredictable moment on here because it feels like she's constantly coming out of the shadows and showing her face, and then quickly going back into it. It's very
playing peekaboo.
it's very surprising, but like no other moments on here feel like they have that intensity or sporadicness to it just feels very just normal, which kind of makes it almost flat in a weird way. That's all I really got to say. Keep in mind though, scores a few Ptolemies. Right now I'm filling up 6-7.
I'm gonna give this a 6. It's good, but it's not my absolute favorite thing she's done.
I think the biggest problem is that just like I needed more out of the themes and a little bit more out of the intensity of the tracks. I wish there was something, because I feel like even if she had better lyricism, like things that made me like contemplate life or her existence, it would make it a little bit more tolerable. Sometimes if you have a lot of themes, like we'll go into the last Wise Blood record, I bring that up a lot, doesn't really like, it kind of sits in like the same place for a long time, but it's also like really thinking heavily about its surroundings.
I thought about the Wise Blood comparison here, and I would take this record any day over Wise Blood.
You also don't really like that album.
Care for
I'm
it.
the one person.
But that was the thing about it, is that like it sat for too long in one place. And I think that's kind of what happens at the end of this. But I just like Angel Olsen's personality and energy better, and themes, I think.
Okay, are you ready to eat pants?
Yes. Have cow, man. Time to get into the latest Sturgill Simpson record, Sound and Fury. I really like the name Sturgill. My girlfriend does not. That's disappointing to me.
What was your name? What did you want to name your first child? And then you decided it was a good dog name instead? can't remember what it was, like Count. It was, I want to say Count Chocula, but it was definitely not that.
We decided. I think we like the name Wappy a lot. Not for a child. I'm not having any kids, but like for a dog. Wappy, I think, is a good dog name.
You had like a name, but it was really weird and stupid. It was like General something. I can't remember.
Beef Frank?
Something like that. I don't remember.
Yeah. Let's get into this review.
No, let's talk about Wappy more.
No, I don't have anything else to say about Wappy.
Oh, so you'd rather talk about Eat Pant?
Yes. Sturgill Simpson is a country singer-songwriter. He's been putting out music for a little while, but his most notable record came out in 2016 as Sailor's Guide to Earth, which was nominated for Album of the Year at the Grammys that year.
And it won Best Country Album.
Yes. Sturgill Simpson is just incredibly talented. I listened to Sailor's Guide to Earth for the first time this summer, and it had me hooked. Like, I listened to it for like a month straight, like just that. I just think that his raw talent and like throwback to older country artists, like without falling into this really like, is bubblegum country a thing? I feel like that's what we're falling
Bro
into.
country.
Yeah, like we're falling. New country is falling into like it's not even falling. It has fallen into like a really poppy kind of place.
Yeah,
that
because
just doesn't
like
suit it
it's
well.
not all bro country, because like Florida Georgia Line is bro country, but Casey Musgraves is like, I think what you're trying to say is like that bubblegum country where it's like
Kind of, yeah.
it's just pop.
I'm thinking of like, there's obviously like Johnny Cash and Waylon Jennings and Merle Haggard, and I feel like Sturgill Simpson really pays excellent tribute to these older artists. I really like the style of like music that he's making, but Sailor's Guide to Earth I think perfectly encapsulates that. But he also uses other influences, like he covered Nirvana's In Bloom, and I like it miles above the original. Anyway, Sound and Fury is Sturgill Simpson's latest record, and its release was actually accompanied by an original Netflix anime film, which was written and produced by Simpson with Japanese director Junpei Mitsuzaki.
And it has a lot of dystopian elements to it, very apocalyptic
Yeah.
in a sense.
It reminds me of something that Gorillaz would put out.
Yeah.
I didn't watch the film, but I thought that it was really interesting that he would reach out to a completely different, like how American can you get than country music? You know what I mean? And then to reach out to the complete other side of the earth and be like, you want to make a country anime? I really like the way that country music is branching out into other genres.
Yeah.
And we've talked about Lil Nas X on the show, but this is a completely different thing.
Also, it's a weird trend because I think this is going to be popping up a lot more. A lot of these Netflix long music videos.
Jesus is King.
No, not Jesus King. Jesus King is kind of the same deal but different. But more of was Tom York's Mina. Did the same thing. Had a Netflix music video.
I'm also thinking of Beyonce's Homecoming. As
Yeah,
well.
that was another
That was
one.
another
Yeah.
big one. But this latest Sound and Fury record is it's a good mix of like country and blues rock, psychedelic rock, and boogie rock, along with synth rock. Something
Also-
that doesn't really mix a lot with country.
Also, funk. Is
Yeah, it's
played up a
very
lot on here.
funky. It's 10 songs, 41 minutes, and personally, I liked it.
I like the aesthetic he's messing with. I think bigger problems, like big picture problems, is it's just there's nothing lyrically that assesses the change. Or
Yeah.
like it feels fresh. And there's also nothing really attached to the music video either, and I know that's not necessarily the case. And I'm not gonna dip on that, but like I wish like calling something Sound and Fury and giving me that like that album art. I was expecting like something like dystopian and lyrically, but
Afro
no.
samurai kind of vibe.
Yeah,
that's
like
what I'm thinking.
something like that. But like this is very just like it's just the same music he made before, but now it's just at least
but it's under a different.
genre.
Yeah,
It reminds me a lot of what Gizzard does every like 2 months. They restructure how they sound, and sometimes it's good, sometimes it really just has their point. But at least they like try. I'm thinking this is more. This reminds me of more of when they did. What was the one they did before Infest the Rat's Nest? I can't remember now.
Fishing for fish.
Yeah, Fishing for Fishies, where they tried out blues rock and like boogie rock a little bit, and it worked out okay-ish.
I think this has. I think Sturgill has a lot more ground to stand on as far as that goes. You know what Am I making sense?
I think he's so like. I think it's wider in scope than like some of these gizzard changes.
Yeah.
But I also think it's like too wide to the point where
in
we're
a
getting like
sense.
some of these synths. I'm like, I don't think these synths really need to be here.
It's losing some of the country identity, but I'm not sure that Sturgill was ever like a country artist to begin with.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
And the biggest problem on here is that it's not. My biggest problem isn't that it's not country. It's the fact that it's just like so many things.
Yeah.
That it's just hard to nail down like what it's trying to do. And I feel like it could have just explored like one thing instead of like 10, because we get some moments like I think it's Make Art Not Friends and A Good Look, where it's like synth rock and it's just like.
Make Art Not Friends is probably my least favorite track on here. It goes on for almost 6 minutes, and it's just a lot of like not very progressing synths. Also, it falls in just a really bad place. Some of the most upbeat, just great like driving songs, like good road trip songs, come right before it with Ronan and Remember to Breathe and Sing Along, and then all of a sudden we've got this like, hey, let's slow it down with a lull in synth rock. It's that's a little disappointing, I think. But then after that, it starts to pick up again with All Said and Done, Last Man Standing, Mercury and Retrograde.
I think the end of this album just feels forever long.
Yes, Fastest Horse in Town feels forever. It's really rocking, but man, it's a long haul.
Yeah, I just feel like it just Sing Along and A Good Look, I think, work out really well together.
Yeah.
Actually, together. They flow. The first like 4 tracks on here flow, but those 2 tracks in particular like work. I think I could have gone out with some of the synth moments, but like whatever. But like All Said and Done is more like a traditional like country moment, or more traditional than like everything else on here. But and it works, and it's a nice scene change that I feel like you didn't really have to try that hard to make. And I think little moments like that added a lot of depth to this album. But I feel like this album has a weird structure where I feel like it repeats itself in the second half. Like we get the hard start at the beginning, and then we just get to like Make Art Not Friends, and that kind of resets a bit.
I'm glad it does though, because I think that track loses a lot of momentum.
Yeah,
it feels like it needs to like reset itself.
But it's weird because I feel like it almost feels like the gimmick's like over, and that it's like we're now doing the same things over again.
Yeah.
Which I don't think, again, it tries to do so much that I feel like it really honed down on here. So, like, what I like about this is that it has a very funky atmosphere. It's very rushing feel. I like the guitars. I like the scratchiness of this entire record.
Yeah.
I like this, like, backroads feel, but it also feels like you're, like, going down the back roads, a country road in, like, a tank.
Yeah.
Instead of, like, driving really fast on, like a Chevrolet, it's like just driving down in the tank, which I think is really interesting. But I also think like songwriting wise, there's no really reason for these change. I feel like it just doesn't really add anything. It's just more traditional singer-songwriter, country style writing. It's not like bro country, or it's not pandering, but I feel like it just really doesn't do anything to support the energy that the tracks have.
Yeah.
I think it repeats itself in the second half. And it's when it's good, it's great. It's still great, still holds up, but I feel like it makes it a little bit less. It's the law of
diminishing returns.
Yeah. That's all I really gotta say. I think he does a good job on here, but I feel like more could have been done to make this project have a reason to stand out.
Yeah.
And have a reason to exist. Keep in mind that I'll score futile meanness right now. I'm feeling a 6-7 on this.
I feel like a pretty solid 7+ or 7 or 8.
Yeah. So we did Eat Pant. Now it's time to perform the Ode to Joy. Is that how transitions work here?
Yeah, that's it. Time to get in the latest Wilco record, Ode to Joy. Wilco's a Chicago alternative rock band. Jeff Tweedy.
Fronted by Jeff Tweedy.
Yeah, he's the man.
he's the man. He's the lone man in the group. No,
he's the only one in the group. It's just him.
He performs all the instruments.
He's got the drum on the front, and he's got like the cymbal. He's a one-man band. Anyway, Jeff Tweedy's the mastermind behind Wilco. He's been at it for years and years, and of course, I think probably our most popular album, Yankee Hotel Foxtrot, which came out in 2001 and still holds up today. Like I said, probably where they got most of their fans from. They had really great tracks like Jesus Etc., which was the lead single off of that. Just a great track under their belt with a lot of really cool strings. They released an album back in 2016. I can't remember if it was called Wilco. I can't remember if it was called Wilco Schmilko or just Schmilko. But it was very light and it was a lot of fun. They had a lot of tracks, good tracks on there, like If I Ever Was a Child or Someone to Lose. I think that they really nailed it with their sound. Wilco, I think, came back in a really big way there, and I really enjoyed that record. But going into this record, this is their 11th studio album, and I feel like maybe they strayed a little too far from what they were most well known for.
So this is my first Wilco album.
Okay.
Welcome.
Welcome.
And I think it's an enjoyable experience, but I also think it's also super unnoteworthy. So it's right in the middle of where I think albums rank. It's not super lingering where it feels like a tease, what is it? Not tease. It feels like a chore to get through. This feels more flowing, pretty, light. Has some really interesting drum work, consistent, which is really repetitive, and you could say kind of stupid, but I kind of enjoy it. It's just really repetitive kicks, just the simple kick being done through a lot of these tracks. Just light atmosphere, sometimes great strings that remind me of Fleet Foxes and their atmosphere building. And
that's a good comparison.
Kind of folky, kind of nature ridden, like you're in a giant forest. I think they provide some really interesting soundscapes, but I don't think a lot of their soundscapes last the time. I think they're good enough to get me through the initial 2 minutes, and then we'll get into 2 to 3 additional minutes that are just nothingness that doesn't really carry through. I don't think their progression on this really works. I think they have good ideas, but they just stretch them out to the point where anything on this album doesn't really resonate with me. The part where it's kind of hard to keep track of themes or even really purpose to this album's existence, because we start off with Bright Leaves, and again, it's this consistent kick with elements kind of trickling in and out. You'll get some pianos that will trickle in, and you'll get some guitar over top of it that really matches really nicely. But it goes on for 4 minutes, and the appeal really just goes away after a while. While it might be beautiful and while it might be well constructed, I think it just doesn't really serve a purpose to exist.
I would have to agree with all those statements. I think that the music on here is pretty.
Yeah.
Especially, I don't know, some of the first couple tracks, Bright Leaves, Before Us, I like We Were Lucky. But this, I don't know, this doesn't feel like a Wilco album. You know what I mean? For all the things that I've enjoyed from this band in the past, this doesn't even feel like they made it. And I'm wondering why they would even make a change like that. Maybe they just got tired of their own sound. Like Jeff Tweedy wanted to do something different because they've been going at this for a long time. This is their 11th album. I feel like if you're an artist and you don't change up what you're doing, you've got to at least try. But this just doesn't fall anywhere close to what Wilco has always been, and the kind of music that the kind of music that they've been making. I don't know. It doesn't progress. It doesn't. It feels wrong. Mm-hmm. I don't know any other way to say that. They've had some really, really great hits in the past. Past albums that Wilco has put out have been incredible, and then this one just feels like a real disappointment. I don't know.
Yeah, it doesn't stay. This thing isn't offensive to where it leaves a bad taste in your mouth, but it goes on for too long
boring.
to just not be memorable.
It's boring and not memorable, which is, I think, a real shame, because some of my favorite tracks come from different Wilco albums. I forgot completely Random Name Generator, another really great rockin' tune, and then we listened to something like this, and I'm like, what happened? This isn't even the same band.
Yeah. Keep in mind that scores if you tell me it's right now. I'm feeling a 4 to 5.
Yeah, I'm gonna give it a 4.
Yeah. And I was not welcomed on my first album.
Sorry.
But it's okay, because now I'm gonna eat a L'Orange.
It's not how you say it. L'Orange. Actually, I think he put out a shirt a while back that had all the different ways that you could pronounce his name, and it had like L'Orange, L'Orange, like all the different ones, like just written in text on the shirt. I thought that was really funny and clever. I'm also not sure if he knows how to pronounce his own like stage name.
L'Orange.
That was one. LL Cool J was another. We're gonna be going over the latest record by L'Orange and Jeremiah Jae, "Complicate Your Life with Violence." L'Orange is a North Carolina producer currently signed to the Mellow Music Group, putting out I think he's put out a pretty consistent release in the past couple of years, every year. Put out Time Astonishing with Kool Keith back in 2015. The Life and Death of Scenery with Mr. Lift back in 2016. He did a solo album, The Ordinary Man, back in 2017. Brought a lot of Mad Lib type production to the table, except for he wasn't a supervillain. He was a magician. I think that the stories he told on there was really interesting.
Telling stories the way like Doom does with his like cross stitching of old TV sketches and
it didn't just feel like I was listening to a movie like without watching it. It seriously felt like a whole new story was like being told. His production on there, I think, is just really great.
Yeah, very bassy and brassy and huge. The kicks are incredible and they take a lot of space in this very retro sample track.
And then last year he put out this record Marlowe with Solomon Bridges, another rapper, and he I think L'Orange's production on here was really good, but Bridges really failed to pick up the slack lyrically, and it didn't go.
He just didn't
well
have a presence.
Yeah,
and the combination did not
good.
make sense to why L'Orange was putting efforts into something that wasn't going to give him a return.
Right. That was a little disappointing because The Ordinary Man came out the year before and it was really good, but then he released that instead. Jeremiah Jae, on the other hand, is a Chicago rapper and producer. He's the son of jazz composer and musician Robert Irving III, and he was previously signed to Brainfeeder Records, Flying Lotus's label. And this is not the first time that they have worked together. L'Orange and Jeremiah Jae did a project together in 2015. The Night Took Us In Like Family, with its lead single Underworld, and that's what really kind of sucked me into the world of L'Orange. That's how I got to know him. This quote.
Yeah, this is a quote from, so basically this new album, Complicate Your Life with Violence, 17 songs, 42 minutes. I think the summary of this is easily explained by just a few sentences on the Mellow Music Group website.
Yeah, so the quote goes, and I quote, "But this is Marlowe meets Mad Max, where Jay's furtive hero staggers through a futuristic dystopia that feels vaguely familiar. A landscape whose kill or be killed binary is best summed up by the cone. Nobody feels like a hero with a machine gun popping off at him," end quote. I think that's a really great description of what this is about.
Okay, so I put this here for a reason. I don't think it is.
You don't think so? I really like that nobody feels like a hero with the machine gun popping off.
I think
at
this
him.
thing talks about violence. I don't think it has like themes. I think it brings up like machine guns, but it doesn't like have story or narrative that really backs up.
This almost feels like a Terminator or like RoboCop kind of story to me personally. Like that's what I got out of it. We're like talking about like building the perfect soldier.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's like what I got out of it. And like it talks a lot about like the military and like military camps and learning how to be like a good soldier, like a good American.
Yeah.
I think there's even a part in here where they like somebody's like way too young to like join the army, and he asks him, and he's like, "Well, I got a gun, so like I must be a soldier now." I really like that quote. I think that sums it up, especially like the ending line.
I think it sums up what they want it to be. I don't think it sums up what it actually is. Because I think in the end, it feels like there's two stories being told. One that is the lyricism Jeremiah Jae. One is the segments that L'Orange makes in the interludes. And the interludes, I think this time, usually I really like his splicing and how he crafts these narratives. This time it just feels very contrived and it's been done before. I don't think it really makes anything interesting. he's created really, really cool spaces before, like on Life and Death of Scenery with Mr. Lift. He had a bunch of segments on there with what's his name, White Snack, and they're really interesting. They're like these very cool dystopian moments of this like this Big Brother like character, and it's really cool. This is a very cool dystopian society. This is just like, I've heard it before. Like, I felt like I heard this before. And, like, these stories, they line up, but they don't really feel like they craft, like, one whole narrative. And Jeremiah Jae, at first, I didn't feel like he really added anything to this. But I think as time goes on in this album, I think they feel like a well-oiled machine, especially in the second half. Yeah. I think once we get to, like, Devil's Piano, After Hourly Life, Ghost Town, The Light, they feel like one cohesive unit. This, like, pairing makes sense. I feel like Jeremiah Jae is giving as much to L'Orange as L'Orange is giving to him. Like, it feels like this duo is well balanced. It makes sense.
It's
like
a symbiotic relationship.
Yeah, it works. I think Jeremiah Jae, his hooks are pretty weak at times. They're pretty basic. They don't really do much for me. Like on Dead Battery, I don't think that really works. I think it just seems.
Yeah, I think the hook is not good on that, but definitely I think the production is
the production cues on the hook work.
Yeah,
I think Jeremiah Jae's performance just comes off as pretty clunky, and it makes the production kind of overcarry him. Also, I think Jeremiah Jae is a little bit quiet on a lot of these tracks, and I think some artists like Zero come on and they completely outshine him. Like Zero, who I've previously seen on John Wayne's rap album 2. Mm-hmm. He's a very shiny, invigorated voice, and he comes in and he dominates the track. On Borrowed Brass, he essentially does that. He kind of outshines Jeremiah Jae, but he also makes Jeremiah Jae step up his game a little bit. And it's
gotta compete.
It's interesting. I feel like there's a challenge there presented to him, and he tries to outdo it. I think that pairing works. I just think Jeremiah Jae in the mix is just a little cloudy at times. And he just, especially in the first half, I feel like he's just, like on Behavior Report, I feel like he's just a little bit too quiet.
Yeah. That was not I don't think that's like a super good way to start out the album because this is Jeremiah Jae's first appearance and he was just really quiet. He was almost like whispering. It's like Earl Sweatshirt levels, kind of whispering.
Just buried in the mix.
That's what it feels like. This is obviously a L'Orange project.
Yeah.
Like, I still really like his ear for samplings, and his ear for sample material is, I think, unmatched. I think he's so good at picking vocal lines and snippets to tell like this kind of story that he wants to. But like you said, I'm not sure that the stories like line up super well of like what Jeremiah Jae's lyricism is telling and what L'Orange is telling in his snippets.
In like ideas of like the army and weaponry will be brought up. But, like, I don't think that leads to just, like, ideas of violence. I get ideas of, like, chaos. I don't get ideas of violence. And, like, violence is essentially chaos. But, like, it isn't explained in a way that makes sense. Mm-hmm. I don't feel like that theme of violence is explained. And it feels very escapable on this project.
Yeah.
And almost kind of non-threatening in a weird way. Some other moments I really enjoyed. Devil's Piano on here is fantastic. I think that's the pairing's best outing on here. I like how the sample is it feels super sped up. The piano is just very fast and impressive. It's hard to tell if there's even really like splicing going on there because it feels just like one just sped up sample that works perfectly. But also Jeremiah Jae feels like he's sped up, like they just sped up his like speed a little bit, and it's really strange. Just the pacing of that track is just very unorthodox and kind of surreal. Clay Pigeons with Billy Woods. Billy Woods showing up down here is a complete surprise. Not really like the production I like hearing Billy Woods over. I like him hearing being over like more decrepit.
This really isn't his element, but I also feel like he did a really good job on here, and I was happy to see somebody with his kind of name recognition on this project.
He works with Jeremiah Jae a lot. Like that, that pairing feels like it works and meshes up well. Again, not the biggest, not like the best type of production I like hearing Billy Woods over, but it works. I think he does. He needs to be over a little bit more spacey things because he's a little bit more abstract.
I liked seeing him out of his element a little bit. That was fun for me, I think.
But yeah, I like moments. I like Dead Battery as a track. I don't like the hook.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting. I think it suffers from some problems that the first half has with Jeremiah Jae just being a little bit too quiet. I like moments like Bowered Brass. I like production across this entire thing. It's bassy, brassy, thick, completely unexpected. I think L'Orange does his own thing really well on here. His own idea of this old school style of sampling really well. And I think he's the best part about this. I think Jeremiah Jae stands up for himself a little bit, but I think lyrically I just need more themes. I need more ideas. And if you're going to bring up this idea of violence, I think L'Orange and Jeremiah Jae could have come up with a better idea of how to make this really important to the album.
More cohesive idea.
And also unescapable, because it's just like very... You could listen to this album and not really get the idea of violence or just chaos going into it. It just feels more just ideas of weaponry and like both an army and also like traditional like gangsta life.
Yeah.
Keeping in mind that I'll score a few Italian Venus right now, I'm feeling like a 6 to 7 on this.
I think I'm gonna give it also a 6 to 7. I'll probably give it like a 7 minus actually. This was I think enjoyable like to a certain degree.
Yeah.
I really enjoy both talents on here, but the ideas don't always feel as cohesive as they could. Also, as a side note, the album artwork on here is some of my favorite of the year so far.
Yeah, that's the thing
really
that
cool.
fits like the sketches the most,
Yes.
which is nice. I think this is kind of an ongoing thing with L'Orange. I feel like he's able to like make really incredible work, but he isn't able to like stick the landing all the way. Like we go over Tom Astonishing with Cool Keys. Like it's just like there's
It's got cool keys on it. He's already got a handicap.
like we'll get like really cool moments. Like we'll get a drop in from MC Paul Barman or like a moment from Open My Eagle, and you get these really impressive moments from Keith and like how he's able to balance them and keep them away from Foot Locker-esque territory. But like I just don't feel like there's super amount of substance there. Same thing with the Life and Death scenery. I think the interludes are impressive. I think he makes Mr. Liv look impressive, like more than I've ever seen, because Mr. Liv has never really done anything for me, but he looks like a force to be reckoned with on that album. Mm-hmm. Ordinary Man works, but I feel like it felt a little bit too empty at times. This just doesn't stick the landing as well. I think there's like good intentions, and I think there's good ideas going into it, but they just like doesn't stick the landing. And I don't know if it's like whether it's the collaborator or it's just L'Orange. I feel like I just want it's close but no cigar, and I feel like we just keep on getting to this point.
Yeah,
and it's kind of disappointing, but also I think the music that comes out of it's still really good. And that's it.
Okay,
that's it for this week's episode of the Anthony and Todd Show. This is episode 111. We're a weekly podcast that critiques and memes music. And if you want to find us on social media, you can find us at Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Anthony and Todd. If you want to find us on YouTube, youtube.com/The Anthony and Todd Show. If you want to find us on podcast services, Apple Podcasts, Google Play Podcasts, and Spotify, search The Anthony and Todd Show. And if you want to support us monetarily on Patreon, you can do so by going to patreon.com/The Anthony and Todd Show and give us your money so I can buy a jet ski. Until next time, guys, I've been Vincent.
I'm Trevor.
And see you, boyos.
Bye, everybody.